Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Real CFO podcast. I am excited to be joined today by Blake Martin. Blake is with FranNet. He's a franchise guy, certified, I might add, and just an all-around good human being. So Blake, we appreciate you being on, man.
Thanks. Appreciate being here, Chad. And you're right. I'm definitely certifiable in something.
Right? Aren't we all? Aren't we all? But no, I'm excited today for a couple of reasons. One, I've been involved in franchise in the past, kind of how I got my start into quasi entrepreneurship, right? And they're the ups, the goods, the bads, pros, cons. There's things that need to be analyzed before somebody one commits to going into franchising collectively, or what franchise in particular, and then two, and maybe more importantly, I want to focus on, I think our audience will get significant value, is how that whole motto, givers gain, kind of you live that. It resonates from you. And ever since I've known you, giving back, and even if it was business motives or opportunities you were pursuing, you always brought along the community or some purpose. So I want to dive into that as well. So it's going to be good today.
Thank you. You're making me blush a little.
Sorry, man.
But yeah, more than happy to talk about that stuff. So appreciate you having me along.
Yeah, let's start with franchising. How did you get involved in franchising? And explain to our audience, from your context, being in that industry for years, what franchising is and how that differentiates from maybe going into business in another realm.
Sure. Well, so to the first part of that question, I fell into it by accident, and literally 25 years later, this year, here I still am in it. So what I mean by I fell into it is me and a former business partner, we started a home care agency back in the mid 90s. Mind you, I was 10 years old then. Okay, Chad. So we started a home care agency back when that wasn't a thing. Like, there was no Home Instead or Right at Home. People didn't know what that was. But I grew up in Michigan, so I was in the metropolitan Detroit area, and we started this agency. And the timing ended up being good, which my business partner, primary partner, knew. He had done his research on the industry. And so it started to grow. We started to have some success after fumbling around and figuring it out. And we wanted to open up satellite offices, which we tried and failed at multiple times, and started to realize the problem is that we don't have, when we're bringing in managers and general managers, we just can't find people who live and breathe this, right? Who it's like their lifestyle, like they have all of their heart into this business. And one day, quite literally, my business partner, the majority owner, walked into my office and said, "We're going to franchise this." And I'm like, "What? What do you mean? We're not in McDonald's." Like, that's how much I knew about franchising at the time.
Yeah.
And the explanation, which has stuck with me ever since and has been a theme throughout my career of helping people start franchises, is that the reason it would work so well in our industry, like it has in other industries, is in franchising, you're giving people ownership, right? They start their own business. They own 100% of it. You still, as the franchisor, you own the brand, and you're just showing them how to hitch their wagon to that brand, learn from your own successes, mistakes, and hopefully get to profitability and scalability much quicker than they could on their own.
Yeah.
And so giving them ownership in that instance, it solved a lot of our challenges, in that we knew they would put their own blood, sweat, and tears and their own financial resources into that business, their own reputation on the line, and work it as hard as we did. So it worked out, and it went really well, and the business started to grow. It was an early time in that industry. There was only a few of us in that home care franchise industry. Now there's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
But one of those early ones was Right at Home. So lo and behold, we all knew each other. We all went to the same conferences and stuff. And the founder of Right at Home, Alan Hager, gave me a buzz through an intermediary and said, "Hey, any chance you're looking?" Well, at the time, I was flying in the air about 90% of the time, and there was no end in sight. So he caught me at a good moment. Ended up being with Right at Home. That's what got me to Omaha. I had never stepped foot in Omaha until that first interview. thought, I'll stick it out a year and a half, 2 years. 20 years later, I'm still here.
No,
But
that's awesome. I love that you brought up the ideas. You were looking for to satellite, right? Where you
yeah,
controlled everything. You owned all the assets, the business and everything. But with that comes a lot of responsibility, and you have to rely a lot on other people to have that same mindset or approach to things as you do as an owner. And that's difficult even in outside of franchise. Just as a business owner myself, both in franchising and outside, it's, are you creating enough opportunities for those that you're bringing along with you, whether it be through franchising or as an
yeah,
employee, right? They have to have some opportunity to be able to grow and pursue a purpose that they have. So I love that about franchising, because it is, you take a lot of the learning pains right away, and
yes,
provide people the opportunity to grow and build their own business and maybe legacy for them and their family. That's awesome. So
yeah.
right at home for 20 years.
So I was at Right at Home for 11 years.
11. Okay.
And after, so I had started as an entrepreneur in the home care space, moved into franchising, kind of created my own corporate America role for myself by turning into the franchisor, and was content where I was, but started to realize I've gotten a long ways away from the entrepreneurial side of things. So when Right at Home was being sold, which ultimately was sold to private equity, and it made sense, right? I had a heads up on it because I was in charge of the international stuff and had to let our international partners know about it. So I had a heads up and realized, gosh, private equity firms, when they come in and buy a company, they have their own COOs that they bring in. That was my title on my business card, COO. So that, well, I mean, things are going to change. I might create that change myself or just kind of see how things unfold. And um, anyways, went home, talked to the wife, and decided, I need to start looking. But I love the coaching part of franchising. So I went back into the old Rolodex, so to speak, and looked at, I'd always paid attention to FranNet, which is a franchise system that helps people become franchise owners.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew somebody that was doing it, and I reached out to her and said, how's this thing going for you? And about 4 months later, I went through my process that I help people through now, and realized this is what I want to do. Like, I want to help people start their own business and figure out if starting their own business means joining a franchise system.
Yeah.
And that's what I do for a living today as a franchisee of the FranNet organization. And it'll be 9 years in 2 months here that I've been doing that.
Wow. I know it's been a while. We've known each other for quite a while. Uh,
Yeah.
Tell me, so if someone is looking to get into business for the first time and franchising is something they want to consider, what are some of the critical things they need to be aware of? You see these things out here, these ideas, these concepts, everything looks great, right, on the face
Mm-hmm.
of it, because that's the marketing, that's the presentation. So it's easily to be like, hey, I want to pursue that opportunity. I may have gone down that road myself. Let's just say
Mm-hmm.
that, and say, this looks like a great opportunity. All the hoopla and flair around it is great, but there were some challenges after I got in that weren't quite what they seemed. And had I had someone like you, I might would have been able to avoid some of those. So, what are somebody's considering that? What are the
Mm-hmm.
three must dos to before they fall or kind of put their stake in the ground and say, I'm going with this one?
Yeah. It's a great question. And it's really at the core of what I do to help people. Answer number one is you have to get yourself comfortable with being in an environment where the advantage is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, right? So in a franchise system, working together in partnership with the franchisor who owns the brand, who's at the headquarters location, right? And all of your fellow franchisees. It's all about utilizing best practices, learning experiences, and following the system that has been built. in order to achieve success. Now, that sounds pretty simple, but in practical application, actually executing it, it means you have to be okay with being coached, right? No matter how experienced and successful you've been in entrepreneurship as a business owner or a professional, you have to be okay with some give and take and learning how to be part of that system. I'll give you an example, right? Probably the most famous franchise out there that most people bring up when I say name a franchise is McDonald's. And it's been one of the most successful, longest running franchises in modern history. So there's a reason everybody thinks of it. Most people who join a McDonald's, I would argue almost all of them anymore who join a McDonald's, they never ran a burger shack before, right? They didn't run a burger restaurant before. Maybe they run some other kind of restaurant. But in that franchise system, they're not looking for people, like in most of them, that have done that kind of business before. They're looking for people that have transferable professional skills, those soft skills, like managing people, managing inventory, customer service, right? Knowing how to exceed expectations. And so McDonald's says, we know how to run this business already. And it's just a matter of asking you to execute it at the local level. And it's the same with many franchise businesses. So you have to be okay with that. And my second answer would be get a very clear understanding of what the role of the franchise owner is supposed to be in order for you to be successful in the business, right? And so where you can get tripped up, whether you've been a business owner or not before you join a franchise system, is do you understand where you need to spend your time and where you don't need to spend your time in order to be successful in that franchise system? And one of the key components of building that understanding when you're going through the research, and what I really insist my clients take advantage of, is you have to ask that question over and over again of the executives within the organization. Where do I need to be spending my time? What do I need to be doing? Because it might be a very different answer than you expect it to be. And then have that same conversation with a bunch of the franchisees who are already in that franchise system. How do you spend your time? Where do you spend what skill sets do you leverage? And what do you delegate or hire out to other people in the beginning, in the third year, and in the 10th year? It's one of the advantages of researching franchises is you can have those conversations with people that are already doing it. So take full advantage of that and understand what that owner's role is, in addition to what it means to be a part of that system.
No, that's great news. I wish I had you around because I'll tell you two things. When I got into franchise early on and almost failed the first 3 or 4 years,
Mhm.
things that tripped me up, ego. I was in the business that I got into just on a different side of the fence and a different way, a different model, so to speak. So I thought I knew better than right
Yeah,
the franchisor.
very common.
Provided similar service, just to different people, different business model, right?
Yeah,
So ego, and then part of that ego was the translation that you just said for number two is coaching. You have to be able to be coached or want that coaching. So I always tell people anymore that I talk to them, if you're looking at franchise or looking at business, don't necessarily get into something that you know how to, do the nuts and bolts of,
yeah.
right? Because your role doesn't need to be doing the nuts and bolts most times. You can find people to do the tighten the nuts, loosen the whatever. Uh, to run the business, that's what you need to be. You need to be overseeing the business, going down avenues to get the business to grow. And I fell into that trap for the first 3 or 4 years. I did all the work.
Oh, yeah. You were
Right. So
working in the business
I
instead
was,
of
well,
on the
I was in
business.
the business. And if you're working in the business, it doesn't leave much time for family and other things and business growth.
Yeah.
Right. Because you can only stretch so far. So that's a mistake I made. And definitely one of the values I see, and definitely talking to somebody that gets it and has lived it like on both sides of the fence, right? You've been a franchisor, you've been a franchisee, so to speak, and then you've ran operations for a major franchise.
Yeah, and I will tell you, having been a franchisor for a bunch of years, makes me a much wiser franchisee. No question about it. Not that it's a prerequisite, not that you have to have
Right.
that experience, but it helps me. I probably had a much smaller leap of faith in joining a franchise system than most people that I help, because I already understood a lot of the motivations, why they were doing this, why this was in their franchise agreement, why they made certain choices, because I had, been in the boardrooms making those choices. And I do believe that the value that I bring to my clients now as I'm helping them research franchises, yeah, I've been on both sides of that table. And if nothing else, I can set good expectations for you.
Yeah. So I want to touch on one other thing about franchising, and then I want to get into your uh, mindset and how you kind of conduct yourself within the community and the
Sure.
way you do things. But, um, you hear item 19, right? I know in looking at franchises in the past and everything, there item 19 is a very important piece of information.
Hmm.
And it's not always required to be included in a franchise disclosure document, depending on state. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so tell everybody what item 19 is, why it's so important, and kind of the red flag, or at least the way I perceive it, red flag that throws up if they don't have one.
Yeah. So item 19 it's one of 20 some sections, or really about 30 sections, that are required to be in the franchise disclosure document, which is a big, fat, thick document that you receive from any franchise system that is thinking about having you join them as a franchise owner. So the Federal Trade Commission oversees the franchising industry, and any franchisor that wants to sell franchises in the United States has to provide an updated disclosure to the FTC, and to the point that you referenced, some additional disclosures to 14 other states. And that includes these items. Item 19 is a disclosure on earning potential, or more accurately, on average and median revenues of the franchisees who are already in the system. Now, typically, the way they'll disclose that is they'll stratify it based upon um, longevity in business, right? So they'll have a measurement of what are the average and median revenues for franchisees who've been in business for 13 to 24 months and 24 to 36 months, and so on and so forth. So you can get a sense of what the growth trajectory could look like. Um, it's not an earnings claim, nor is it intended to be, because that's a big no-no in franchising. You can't talk about, net earnings or what you're going to take home, because that franchisor doesn't know whether you or I are going to be their best performer ever, their worst performer ever, or somewhere in between, right? So the Federal Trade Commission puts very stringent guidelines on what a franchisor cannot say. Now, you're right. It's often a yellow or a red flag if that item 19 isn't included in a disclosure document. There are some exceptions to that.
Okay.
There are times when a franchise system evolves over the years, and they reinvent how their franchisees operate. And as a result, they might not really have any uniform financials to
Mhm.
disclose. So if an organization has evolved such that their revenue streams vary, and providing a disclosure of medians and averages doesn't really provide an accurate representation of what the average franchisee might expect to generate, then they may just make a statement that we don't disclose this item 19. And by default, what that means is we're going to insist that you talk to our franchise owners about their own experience, have private conversations with our franchise owners, and they are allowed to talk specifically about earnings, revenues, how long it took them to get to break even, etc.
Yeah.
That third category, which is what you were referencing, Chad, some choose not to disclose it because they don't have a good story to tell, and that's a concern. That's a red flag.
So one of the values or benefits, I should say, of working with you or someone on your team would be you notice those red flags, those warning signs, at least know to ask the questions or do further due diligence, right, with the potential buyer to unearth maybe some, because when you're wanting to go into business, you're so excited. You got an opportunity to go out on your own. It's there's so much, and I can do that, and I can crush the competition just like these other guys. And then you get in, you're like, what I do. So due diligence is very important, and so I know that's a value of working with yourself or somebody like you. Now, let's transition to something else. You've been in business for a while. Um,
Mhm.
I'm going to say 90% of the time that I see you, run into you, see you on social, it's connected to some other cause or something else or somebody else that is benefiting. Um, like for instance, every year you have the annual celebration. I don't know what you call it, but I know I get an invitation every year. I get multiple phone calls from Blake inviting me to it. And this event is a fundraiser. It's social. It's and people from the nonprofit industry, the government industry, the every sector is represented there, and it goes to support a very worthy cause. I think the last few years it's been the 50-mile march. Tell us a little bit about the 50-mile march, your event, but what why do you get so involved? Why are you so
Yeah.
driven on community and helping others, whether that's businesses or
Yeah.
giving people, communities, nonprofit?
Well, I try to practice what I preach. And what I mean by that is when I'm working with somebody, and I've been helping people start businesses for 25 years now. I went back and counted because somebody wanted me to put it into a presentation. I've helped more than 500 people directly and indirectly start businesses over all these years on 6 different continents. So you can guess which continent it doesn't include. um, but one thing that I've always emphasized with folks is their why. Even before Simon Sinek made it popular, by the way. What's your real reason? What's your why? What's your reason for wanting to do this? And don't tell me it's because you want to increase your earning potential. Of course you do. Nobody starts a business to make less money or to earn less income, right? But what is it that's really going to motivate you on those tough days, weeks, and months when you don't want to get out there and hustle harder than your competition? And selfishly, the reason that I'm asking these questions is somebody starts a business in this community or elsewhere and it doesn't make it, it's a reflection on me too, right? So I really want to understand what is going to motivate you to do this. And if you don't have a good reason, maybe now isn't the time yet. Well, my why, which I was very clear on, included 2 things. And one of them was my wife and I knew, my wife Shannon and I, um, we knew that if we were going to do our own business, we wanted it to be something where we could make an impact or we could make a dent in the community. And the second related reason was we wanted our kids to see what that looked like, what giving back to the community looks like and how you give back to a community that helped you become successful, right? My success in business ownership never would have happened without this community getting behind me and helping me build this business. And so I felt from the beginning it was really important to make contributions back to the community that helped us become a successful business. I've always tried to choose fairly intentionally who those organizations are that I support. And I want them to be ones that I have a direct that mean something to me and that means something to the brand in my community. So I don't want it to be a distraction to the brand that I've built with FranNet here in this marketplace, but I want it to be something that has a direct benefit to the community. So the entire time that I've run this business, I've been a volunteer with SCORE, which is the volunteer mentor program that's actually an arm of the Small Business Administration of the SBA. But there's SCORE mentors all over our community and really any community where there's an SBA office. And it's retirees and aspiring retirees like me who want to give back by helping other folks who want to either start or grow their existing business. And it's relevant to my business because, statistically speaking, Chad, most of the people who come to me and say, can you help me start a business or can you help me start a franchise? They never end up starting a franchise, but they start some other kind of business, right? And maybe they hang their own shingle. And if that's the case, they don't have the support in the systems and the processes of a franchisor. They still don't have to go it alone, right? So if they can get an advisor, a mentor, somebody who's been a business owner through SCORE, that can really help them increase their chances of being successful and help them build a more polished business plan to start off on the right foot. So, my participation with SCORE has a lot to do with making sure I understand what the opportunities are within that organization so that the people who I never end up helping with a franchise can still get the guidance that they need.
Yeah. No, that's great.
So can I add a little bit to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm famous.
Sorry, there was an odd moment of silence there. I think you tripped you up. You might have stuttered or
it was that pregnant pause, right?
Yeah.
Now, you've got it down here in my title. I'm a podcaster myself, so I know sometimes what you don't say is important.
Yeah, go ahead. Keep talking.
You're better at this than me. That's what it boils down to.
I don't know about that.
And then I also look at, where is the need the greatest? And I'd been running this business for a number of years and had the privilege of being asked to provide some presentations at Offutt Air Force Base and other military installations in the region because they have programs there, the TAP program, Transition Assistance Program, where folks who are going to retire from the military are actually, in most cases, required to go through this transition program to understand, hey, maybe your next thing is doing your own thing, right? So giving orders instead of taking orders like you did for a long time in the military.
Right.
And I come in and I provide people an overview on what that might look like and, the 101 on franchising. And I had done that for a number of years before I really started to understand more and more about what it takes, how difficult it can be to retire from a life in the military to the civilian world. And I'd never served in the military, so I really dramatically underestimated what that looked like. You go from a very structured environment where for your entire adult life, in many cases, you've been told what to do, what to wear, what your next day is going to look like. And all of a sudden, people are telling you, well, in 12 months, you're good to go. You're out there into the great wild west, and you can do whatever you want to do. Good luck. It can be exceedingly overwhelming.
Sure.
And I started to hear some of the statistics. 21, 22 military veterans take their own lives every day in this country. And the first time I heard that, I thought I heard it wrong. And you mean like every month or every week, right? Every day. And it has a lot to do with PTSD that they've experienced in the military, whether in combat or not, and the influences and the pressures and the stresses of a transition back into civilian life. So I met the folks who founded the 50 Mile March Foundation, which you had referenced. Yeah, that was the benefactor or the beneficiary of our FranNet annual celebration and fundraiser that we've done 8 years running now. 50 Mile March Foundation. We exist to raise funds that help empower veterans who are struggling with mental health challenges, homelessness, and the resulting risk of making dramatic, irreversible decisions like taking their own life. This was started by several veterans who've been there and experienced that themselves, experienced those low points. And so we quite literally march from the state capitol in Lincoln to Omaha, specifically to La Vista, each year to raise funds. And it's become a very successful organization. And we provide grants and donations to groups like Moving Veterans Forward, which is a group of veterans who provide shelter and apartments and furniture to veterans who are literally living on the street. They go get them and they say, We're not going to ask you whether you need help, because you'll always say that you don't need help. That's trained into you in the military. You're part of a team, a mission. So as a fellow veteran, we're telling you, you're coming with us. We're going to help lift you up and empower you to take control of your life again. And so it's been a life-changing experience being part of that nonprofit and having the privilege of being in that march each year for the last 4 years. And I sincerely believe that the effort has been worth it, because it's achieved the goals of making a real impact in the community and teaching by example for my 2 sons.
No, that's amazing, man. And I am very familiar with the organization. I have not marched the 50 miles, but we have supported it
Yet.
for the
You
last.
haven't marched yet, Chad.
I haven't marched yet, but knock on wood, we will get that done. But no, I appreciate you sharing that story and giving, and that's one of the most important things that we can do as business owners. But tons of good stuff, man, from business to life to just how you operate as a human, man. It's really good stuff, and I know our listeners will take some value from it. So, if you're listening to this and you really want to get into business for yourself and haven't even thought of franchise systems or franchising, think about it. It's an option. I've done it. There's pros, cons. You got to weigh them. Talk to somebody like Blake. He's going to be truthfully honest with you. Blake is not there to sell you a franchise. He's there to create opportunities for you if it's the right time. And then, if you are inclined, please do support the 50 Mile March Foundation. It is an organization that does a lot here locally for veterans, and it's run by some solid individuals. So with that said, Blake, appreciate your time here. Where can folks find you or reach out to you? Where's the best spot?
You can Google me, Heartland Franchise Guy. You can go to frannet.com, or you can just connect with me directly. Since people listen to this on the recording, you can reach out to me on the phone, 402-415-3651, or just hit me at on social media or at bmartin@frannet.com. It's Frannet with a double N.
And you have a podcast as well. What's the title of your podcast?
The Heartland Franchise Guy.
The
We
Heartland
talk about
Franchise.
all things small business ownership, entrepreneurship, and obviously with a direct bent towards the franchising industry.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Blake. Appreciate you.
Thank you, sir.